and live with hope. Jesus is the Redeemer and friend, the only comforter when you feel you are alone. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. When you get into trouble, lift up your head and look up to the mountains where your help comes from. You surely have a refuge all night, all day. Keep on your faith and live with hope. Jesus is the Redeemer and friend, the only comforter when you feel you are alone. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. Why don't you trust in Him? He's faithful and true. He promised to take us home on His soon return. Hold on and never look back. Believe in His word. Keep on your faith and live with hope. Jesus is the Redeemer and friend, the only comforter when you feel you are alone. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. Jesus is the Redeemer and friend, the only comforter when you feel you are alone. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope. He will be there when you cry out. Keep on your faith and live with hope.
All believers, even when they are at home. Now, in dealing with some of the things that Paul has spoken about and how we can translate these biblical teachings into day-to-day life, I have decided to go into my isiXhosa speaking culture to look at how these things can be translated practically on a day-to-day basis. Now, those people who are isiXhosa speaking, the parents who are isiXhosa speaking, they had this idea that when you raise children, there's a certain basic assumptions that you operate with. These are assumptions that they had when they raised their children. The first of these assumptions was that children learn through listening. In other words, you have to tell them what they need to do. Tell them ahead of time, this is what I want you to do. So that you don't get to be angry and upset and punish them for things that you did not tell them to do or tell them not to do. So it was important for us to teach children through precept. Now, that's a very interesting assumption, because when you go to the book of Deuteronomy, the Lord talks about how we should train our children. We should teach our children His law. We should teach our children His commandments. And He gives us instances when we do that. He says, when we rise up And when we go out and when we come in, when we rise up, when we walk out of the house, when we walk along the road, we must do it. When we sit down to eat, when we lie down, we tell our children what God's commandments are. So this part, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, talks about how it is important that we tell our children what they should do and what they should not do. And as we tell them what they should do and what they should not do, an interesting thing that we don't always factor in as parents is this. We should sometimes tell them, if we can't tell them all the times, most of the time, tell them why they are being told to do something or not to do something. The interesting thing with God is that when he gives a lot of these commands to Israel to say they must do this, they must remember the Passover, he gives them a reason. He says, when your children ask you, why do we do this? He says, this is the reason you give them. And it was important that people be given reasons why they should do certain things, because it allows them to wrap their mind around the significance of this. It allows them to see the value of it, and it allows them to embrace it with understanding. So the first assumption is Xhosa speaking parents had was that children will learn through listening, and they would then encourage that as you raise children, you talk to them. Tell them what should happen. Tell them what should not happen. And some of the ways in which they told children what to do and what not to do was through stories. They would tell stories. Some of the stories would be about some animals talking to one another. And they were like parables. They had a message in it. They had a lesson in it. They were teaching their children what to do and what not to do. We have an entire Bible that we can use to teach our children what to do and what not to do. Beyond that, there are things in the household that have to be done that are not covered by the Bible. And some of those things are cultural. Teach them. Tell them what they should do. Tell them what they should not do. It's interesting that sometimes when a relative comes to visit, or we go and visit a particular relative, we will tell the child, this is how you address the relative. Sometimes when an older person is giving a child a gift, it could be money, it could be a sweet, and the child extends one hand. We tell them, no, extend both hands. And as they extend both hands, we are just telling them, this is how you do it. And they follow suit and they do it. So the assumption was that children learn through listening. The second assumption was that children will learn through observation. In other words, they will observe you do certain things. They will observe other people do certain things. And therefore, they will do what other people have been doing. That's it. That's how they will learn. The other assumption was, and it was important that understanding that children learn by observing, it was important that the parents themselves and the other people around them provide good examples. It was important for them to provide good examples. And this is why sometimes when being reprimanded, you would be told that you're going to spoil the younger children. I remember when I was young, I'm the eldest boy at home. And so what would happen is that I would take my clothes, I would take them off the clothes line, and then I'd be lazy to fold them. So I would just take them as a big bunch and shove them into the shelf in the wardrobe, take the door and close it quickly so that the door holds the clothes. But what would happen is that every time I opened the door, the clothes would fall to the ground. I'd pick up what I want and then shove it back in. So one time I'm busy doing this, and my mother stands by the door and says to me, you must learn to fold your clothing, because what you are doing now, you're going to spoil my children. They are going to watch you do it and end up doing it too. I thought, well, I told them, you must fold your clothes and pack them nicely into your shelf. Well, I told them many times, and my mother told them many times. One day, she calls me. I go to the room, and there's my brother standing with his clothes on the ground, and the wardrobe door has been opened. And she says, you see, I told you. They copy what you do. Because you do it, they do it as well. And so it was important to Xhosa speaking parents to understand that you don't just teach children don't only learn by listening. They also learn through observation. The third assumption was that children learn when they do something with you. This is why when we were learning how to slaughter animals, they would bring you on board as we were slaughtering the animal. I remember the first time I was involved in the slaughtering of a sheep. I was told to stand there and watch. So I stood and watched from a distance because the sheep was moving and I was afraid of it. And then they slaughtered it, moved on. Next time they told me, go there, hold one of the legs. So I was there, I was holding one of the legs and the sheep was kicking. And that's all I did. I held one of the legs. Then one day they told me, no, now you must be the one who puts your knee on the ribs of the sheep so that as it moves around, it doesn't kick around. And that's what I did. And then one day, after having seen people do that, one day I was told, okay, fine. Now you let's get involved in the slaughtering. And I had my opportunity of doing the slaughtering. But the process way to doing the slaughtering with other people, that's how you learn. They assumed that when girls are going to learn how to wash dishes, you bring them to the sink and then you wash, they observe, and they wash with you. You can be able to say, no, wash like this, do it like that. And that's it. You're doing it with them. And it was wonderful. That's how they assumed that's how children would learn. And because of that, it was important that the things we wanted children to learn, we get them involved in doing them. You don't just tell them to do it. You don't just let them do it. You don't just let them watch you do it. You get them to be involved in doing it. As they did it with you, they would learn. Third, the next assumption they had is that after children learn by doing things and they are supervised. And so you find that one of the older kids has been sent there to go and watch, and they'll be told, make sure they do it right correctly. And this one would be there supervising, no, do it like this, don't do it like that, do it like this, don't do it like that. And so they knew that as a child gets to do something on their own, they are being supervised, their confidence gets to grow, and their ability to do whatever they need to do also gets to grow and develop. From there, they knew that once the child is able to do it under supervision, then they will be able to do it on their own. They'll be able to go out and do what is expected of them, not to do what is expected of them because now they've been trained, they've been raised to be able to do it. They know what to do. They know what to do. Now, even on their own, they're able to be fine. And lastly, when children were able to teach other children what to do and what not to do, then the parents knew that this process was done. Now, these assumptions on how children learn, how children are raised, how children are trained, influenced the things that they did, influenced the processes they used in raising their children. Now, the first of those processes is modeling. Because children learned through observation, after you've told them what to do and what not to do, they would observe you and to see what you do. Now, for you as a parent to be able to model something, you needed two main resources, and this was time and presence. And this is why in the culture, girls would be on their mothers' backs until they could walk. And then girls would follow other girls and do what women do. And then boys, when they got off their mothers' backs, they followed other boys and they followed men and did what men did. Now, as a man, you needed to be present. You needed to be present physically so that they could see how things are done. They needed to see how a man behaves. The Bible does not explain how you react to somebody who insults you in public because your cattle have gone have eaten his cabbages. The Bible does not say how do you react to the insult. You could draw some principles, but then the kids had to sit and watch how does the man react to it. And as they watch the father react, they would know this is how you react. When somebody else comes to greet you and asks you for something you don't know, how do I get to such and such a place? And you don't know where such and such a place is. The kids would sit there and watch. How do you respond as a man when you don't know? Do you say, I don't know? Do you try and help the person to get the information from somebody else? Do you refer them to somebody else? Do you leave them on to be on their own? They would sit and observe how you do it. For them to be able to observe you, you had to be there. You had to be there physically. You had to be present. And for you to be present, you needed to make time. You needed to make time for them to be with you, time for them to follow you around. And you needed to make time for them to be able to ask questions and to explain, this is why I do this, this is why I do this, this is why we don't do that. And that's how they learned. Now, this particular lesson from our Xhosa speaking parents is important to us because the times we live in are so expensive that our time can be consumed by the process of making money. We can be involved in the process of raising the money to finance their lives, that we don't always have the time to be there physically, to be present in the lives of our children. When we don't have the time to be there physically, to be present in the lives of our children, we are unable to model it. At best, we will tell them what to do, and it ends there. Sometimes, even in the little time that we do have, we come home. Sometimes we want to unwind, understandably. We just want to sit back and watch television. We just want to relax. We just want to be left alone. We don't want to be bothered because we've had a long and difficult day. Some of us have had a long and difficult week, and it would be good if they would leave us alone just so that we can be, just so that we could relax. In the process of saying, leave me alone, we are missing out on an opportunity to model what it means to be a man, what it means to be a Christian man, what it means to be a believer, what it means to be a child of God in various circumstances. When we take our children with us shopping and they watch us interact with a teller at the supermarket, as you greet the teller and the teller greets you back and you handle that teller with respect, the child gets to learn that you treat people with respect. As you drive along the road and somebody cuts in front of you, and of course you could curse, you could swear, you could be angry, but then the child does not have a verse that they can go to about how you respond to somebody who cuts into you when you are in traffic. What do? You respond in a way that models this is what Christians do. Now, what happens if you do get to insult, if you do get to shout and say something you should not have said? Well, there, you then admit that I should not have done that. That was wrong. Because even when you do make a mistake, the fact that you are able as a father, as a man, to say, I made this mistake, shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm really, really sorry. There's no excuse. When you do that, then the children get to know that when you do make a mistake, you are able to acknowledge it. You are able to acknowledge it. You are able to apologize. That in and of itself is a lesson. But for them to learn it, we must be there as men. We must be there as fathers. Because if we cannot be there to model it, sometimes we will be angry because we told them to do something, but we didn't model it. And sometimes we've noticed in life that the things we say are not as powerful as the things we do. We have noticed that now that we are parents, we are able to look back at the things our parents said and then say, you know what? It is now that it is making sense. In other words, they said it, we remember it, but we did not always follow it because it's something that they said. But the things we've seen people do, those have been easier to copy. Those have been easier to follow. It has been easier for us to follow the example of something we saw than the example of something we heard. So the first appeal for today is this. Let's make the time to be able to model what it means to be a believer, what it means to be a believing husband, what it means to be a believing father. Let us model it to our children. Let's model the behavior we want from them here at home. If you want them to wash the car, go and wash it. Let them see you wash it. Let them watch you wash it. Let them see how careful you are, how thoroughly you are in washing the car. As they observe you wash your car, they are beginning to see how a car is washed. The day you say wash the car, they've seen how you do it. They know how it is done because they've seen it being done. It's important that we model it. When we don't model the washing of the car, we tell them to go and wash it. And they come back and they've done a shoddy job. The anger that comes, that we have because they've done a shoddy job, sometimes feels unjustified to them. Because you are angry, and they're not quite sure why you are angry, because they did not know they should have also washed the tires, because they did not think it made sense for someone to wash tires. But the day they see you wash the rim of your car, the mags, and they see you polish the tires, to them it clicks that you also wash the rim. The children may be sitting there thinking, what's the point of washing the inside of the handle of the door? You know, when you open the door, that side of the door, what's the point of washing that part? Because nobody ever gets to see it. But if you had modeled that you also wash that inside of the door, then they'll also wash the inside of the door because they've seen you do it. Now, when you don't model it and they don't do it and you're upset and you are angry, sometimes it feels unjustified. And sometimes they can be provoked into anger. Of course, they may not be able to express it because they may fear you. But then they'll have this anger. They'll have this sense that you're being unfair. Why? Because you did not specify it in detail that this is what they should do. So they use their common sense. We need to make time to be present, to model that which we want from our children. This is the first lesson I'd like us to deal with for today. The second one is peer education. The important thing here was this. They understood that, the parents understood that when you are going to raise children, unfortunately, you can't raise them on your own. They will not only use your example. They will not only copy the things that you have done. What will happen? These children will also observe how their siblings do things. They will observe how other children do things. And we have noticed that children tend to learn faster what they see their siblings do. You'll notice that children, younger children, I saw this with my son. that he quickly was able to speak because his older sister was speaking. So he also rushed and tried to speak. He quickly walked before his sister in terms of age. He walked quicker than his sister did. Why? Because he was watching his sister walk around and he also wanted to walk, and so he did. And we've learned that when we teach the older one to do it, the younger one wants to learn quickly because he also wants to do what the bigger sister does. And that's the reality of life. Children learn a lot from their peers, from their older siblings. And as they learn from them, then it's important for us as we raise the children to know that we raise them in an environment where the peers around them, where the siblings around them have similar values. They've been taught the same way. When the children listen to older siblings call you daddy, and they watch older siblings react in a particular way, they watch older siblings pack up dishes and put them in the sink, guess what? One day the child comes and says, can I take it? And they take it and they walk and they put it in the kitchen as well. Why? Because they've seen other children do it. And because of this, IsiXhosa speaking parents felt that when it came to other children, older siblings of your child, be very clear on the roles they should play. Today we call these roles chores in the home. Some of these roles could be gender roles where you can say, you do this because you're a girl, you wash dishes. That's what they did at the time. Today, I would encourage that you teach all your children how to wash dishes, teach all your children how to cook. When they leave home, they are going to need those skills. So I would advise that do not deprive boys of an opportunity to learn how to cook and wash dishes just because they are boys. They will grow up. They will be adults who will live on their own, and they will need to learn how to cook, how to clean, how to wash their own dishes, how to do their own laundry, how to iron their own clothes. It will hold them in good stead to be able to do those things. So these are the roles that you're going to give them in the home. You do this, you do that. You do this, you do that. And as they do these roles, one another, and they learn from one another, you will find that they are able to pick up what is to be done. They are able to learn that which is right and that which is wrong. And it's part of training them. Remember, when we train children, we are not necessarily punishing them. There is a difference between the word train and the word punish. When you are training, you are giving somebody a skill. You are helping them acquire a particular skill. And this is what happens when accountants are being trained. This is what happens when lawyers are being trained, when medical doctors are being trained, when IT specialists are being trained, when security guards are being trained, when the police are being trained, when the military is being trained, when pastors are being trained. We are being given a particular skill. It's not that when we say we are going for training, we are going to be beaten up. That's not it. You're being given a particular skill and you're being molded in how you use the skill in the best way possible. So that's what training is. And so raising children in the training of the Lord meant that you give them skills. You give them the skills that they are going to need, and the way we train them is in keeping with what the Lord has told us what to do and how to do. So these peers, these other children around them, had to be children who are able to transfer some of the skills they've already learned. So it's important that you teach your older children. When it comes to the older children, teach them yourself. Put a little effort in that, because when the younger ones come along, they will learn from the older ones, and it's going to be a quicker process when they learn from their bigger siblings. So they have to have these roles. And secondly, they must have responsibilities. They must know that I'm responsible for making up my own bed. I'm responsible for cleaning my own room. I'm responsible for this. And as they see that other children also have responsibilities, when you tell them to go clean their rooms, go and do they go and do what they are supposed to do. And if you've ascertained that today you are the one who's cooking, you are the one who's washing the dishes, you are the one who's going to clean the lounge and all of that, when you tell them go and do those things, they know these are my responsibilities. They go and do them. When children learn with others and they all get to do their responsibilities and they play their roles within the family, they learn quicker. They learn quicker. And it's important that when we do the training, do not say I'm going to teach the boys but not the girls. I'll teach the girls but not the boys. Teach all of them. They will learn from one another. They also get to learn how to relate with members of the opposite sex here in the home, how to deal with the members of the opposite sex when they're upset. Of course, they'll be rough with one another because they're siblings, but that's where you come in to correct. So when they learn from one another, this peer education where they teach one another is a very important way of our children teaching others. Now, it's an important thing because when we get part of things like the Pathfinder Club or the Adventurer Club and so on and so forth, the different clubs and societies that we have where children become part of them in church, they also get to learn from one another. They get to teach one another. They get to observe how other children do things, and they get to tell each other, no, don't do it like this, do it like that. And all of that is helpful. So it is important that as we raise our children, we make sure that those children around them share the same values. It is important for you that the children around your children share the same values. So invest in the kind of schools you take them to. Invest them in the kind of clubs you want them to be part of. Invest in the church they will go to. Because in that church, if they're children of their age and the children share similar values, it will hold your children in good stead. The next value process that they came up with was reprimand, which is very interesting. After you've modeled what the children should do, and after they've learned and seen other children do what they're supposed to do, not do what they're not supposed to do, then comes reprimand. Reprimand is when, after you've told them what not to do, they've seen you not do it, they've seen other kids here in the home and the ones that are not do it, that's when you come to reprimand. And our reprimand generally came with two phrases. And the two phrases were, asiyenzi le nto apha. We don't do this here. When you do it, when you say that, we don't do this here. Asiyenzi le nto apha. What you are saying to the child is that as a family, we've got values. We have a set of values, and that which you're doing is incompatible with us as a family. Then they get to realize that this is foreign to the family. It's not what we do. It's not what you do. It may be appealing to you. It may be done next door. It may be done across the street. It may be done elsewhere, but we don't do it here. That's the reprimand. You are trying to reinforce in the child their own identity, that you are my child. We are children of God. And as my child and as a child of God, we don't do this. Asiyenzi le nto apha. And the second thing that would come as a reprimand would be, wake wayibona phi? Where have you ever seen this? Who have you wabona bani esenza le nto? Who have you ever seen do this? And when they ask that question, it flows from the fact that they know they were there to model the right thing. They did not do this wrong thing that you are doing. That's why they can ask, who have you ever seen do this? Now, if as a parent you were not there, if as a father you were not there to model it, then you can't quite ask this question, who have you ever seen do this? They might just tell you who they saw doing it. And that person could be on television. The person could be next door, because the person was supposed to model it was not there. So it is so this question of reprimand itself presupposes that we were there as a parent. We were there as a parent to model the right thing, to speak against the wrong thing, to teach why we do this and why we don't do this. And therefore they know what should be done and they know what should not be done. That's why they could then ask, who have you ever seen do this? Wake wabona bani esenza le nto? And the child will stand there, and the child should be stumped at that point, because they get to realize, I've never seen anyone in this home do what I'm doing. And truly, what I've done is foreign to my home, foreign to my family. And because it is foreign, it is not something that I should do. So the reprimand came afterwards. Now, we had rites of passages. Now, these rites of passages differed for different genders. Girls would have something called Ndonjane when they hit puberty. They would have this rite of passage where they would now be told everything about their menstrual cycle. They would be told all of the changes that are now coming. They would now be told that young men are going to take interest in them. This is how they should respond to that interest. This is how they should not respond to that interest. All of that was part of Ndonjane, how they should carry themselves, how they should speak, how they should not speak. Some of the things they used to do as a little child, now they should not do, how they should carry themselves. That was a cultural practice. And generally the aunts, the mothers, sisters, or so on and so forth would be the ones who have the responsibility of passing on this information. They would do that with young girls. With young boys, they would go to the bush, get circumcised, and when they are there, they would be taught what it is to become a man, how a man carries himself, how a man is supposed to use his mind and the ability to talk and his eloquence to win over other men. Now you're not supposed to be violent. A man was taught things that are important, how to deal with women, how to treat women, what is expected of him now that he's a man, how he should relate to boys, how he should relate to older men, how he should relate to other men who are his peers, what the community expects from him, what his family expects from him. All of these were part of the things that you were taught when you went to the mountain, to the bush, to go and be circumcised so that you can come back as a man. Now, these rites of passage, and they would continue. You'd get married, and then they would have a process where they tell you as a young wife, now that you are married, starting from your own family and then the family of your husband. They'll talk to you about what married life is like, what you should expect, how you should behave, how you should carry yourself, and so on and so forth. They even had an attire that they attached to a young bride, and this attire spoke different things, and each item carried a particular message, a particular lesson of how they should live their lives and how they should carry themselves. Now, the different rites of passages were designed to communicate information to children. They were supposed to, first of all, communicate what are age-appropriate allowances. In other words, now that you're of this particular age, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. Now that you are no longer this, now we will not turn a blind eye to this. We expect you to do that. Now, there were certain age-appropriate allowances. Now that you're of this age, we can allow you to do this. Now you can do that, because now that you've gone through this particular rite of passage, this is what you are entitled to. And the important thing about this is, as we raise our children, it's important that as they get to different stages in their lives, we are able to say, now that you are no longer 5 years old, this is what we expect from you. We expect you to do this. We no longer expect you to do that. We are now allowed to do this. There comes a time where you say, now you can have your own phone. Now you can contact other people, and so on and so forth. Age-appropriate allowances as the child grows old. Now, the beauty of this is that when a child knows I will be able to do something at a certain stage or at a particular age, they learn to wait. The silent curriculum was that children were supposed to delay gratification, to know that it's coming at a particular point, not now. I'll wait for it until its right time comes, and then I'll have the full benefit of it. So as we give them those age-appropriate allowances and we tell them, you'll be able to do this at a particular age, we will allow you to do that at a particular age. At a particular age or at a particular stage of your life, we will no longer tolerate this, we will not allow this. Those age-appropriate allowances were also ways in which we could raise our children in the training and admonition of the Lord. Now, as a father, we are expected to be there, to be able to provide guidance when it comes to these age-appropriate allowances. Sit and discuss them with your wife and say, what happens at a particular age? At what stage are we going to allow this? At what stage are we going to allow that? You can communicate it to the children so they can wait and look forward to it and know that when that time comes, this is what is going to happen. I watched my children wait because we told them, you will only be able to get a phone when you turn 12. And so they waited. My daughter started wanting a phone when she was 8, the youngest daughter. And so she waited. And when she turned 12, we got a phone. She was very excited, and a younger brother had to wait because he also had to wait until he turned 12 before he got a phone. Now, 12 is an arbitrary number. It could have been 13, could have been 11, could have been 10. I'm not married to 12. We chose 12 as parents. But when you say at a particular stage, this is going to happen, and we gave them whatever reasons we wanted to give them. We had that number. It was arbitrary in the broader scheme of things, but for us, we had a particular number, and then we stuck to it. But it's important for us as fathers to be there, discuss it with our wives, and share with their children that at a certain stage, this is what's going to happen. And those become our mini rites of passage as we raise our children. Secondly, it's important that we give them age-appropriate education. One of the things that girls you'd be taught during Ndonjane is about their own menstrual cycle, about change that are going to come, and they're gonna come with puberty, how to handle it, how to deal with it, how to handle interest from members of the opposite sex. That was age-appropriate information that they did not give to 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds. At that time, they waited until they hit puberty. And puberty at that stage was not 12, 13, it was much later, 17, 18. But even as it dropped, that was an appropriate time to tell a child about this. And so the idea that you can sit down with your children and give them age-appropriate information is a brilliant idea. Something that we can take, something that we can run with as you give them age-appropriate education, age-appropriate information. You don't have to fight with them about where did you learn this, who told you this, who said that, how come you are doing this, because you were there to provide the education, to be there to be able to give answers. And sometimes as a father, when it comes to your daughters, you may not be able to provide the education, your wife may be. Sometimes you may be the one who has the courage to do so, but go ahead. The important thing is this: we must be there to facilitate the provision of age-appropriate education. And lastly, these rites of passages came with age-appropriate expectations. Now that you are 15, this is what we expect. Now that you are in high school, this is what we expect. Now that you are this is what we expect. And when they know what is expected of them, it's been explained to them, they've asked questions, they are clear on it, then they are able to follow suit. When you do reprimand, you can reprimand on the basis of things that have been communicated. Sometimes as parents, we can be upset with our children because we expected them to have figured certain things out. Well, sometimes that is the case. We expect them to figure things out. But sometimes we did not explain things. We were not specific. We were not direct. We gave general instructions. We hoped that the teacher would have told them at school. We hoped that someone at church would have told them. We expected them to kind of have picked it up somehow. It's important that we sit down with our children and tell them what the expectations are so that they know what is expected of them and they can try to behave and act accordingly. When all else fails, then the stick would come. It's interesting that the isiXhosa speaking parents had a role for a stick, but the stick was not the first thing that they used. The stick came at the very end, after you have modeled the right behavior, after you've told them what the right behavior is and what the wrong behavior is, after the children around them have worked with them and told them what to do and what not to do. They've had siblings that have come on board, and that was a responsibility of older siblings. Tell your brother how to do it, show him how to do it. And after all of that, and after you've gone through the rites of passages, you've given them the age-appropriate education, you've made the age-appropriate allowances, you have clarified what the expectations are at each stage of their life, and still the child does not obey. It is at that point where the stick came in. And even when the parents would use the stick to hit the child, which is corporal punishment, it would be in the context of saying, "Awuva, you don't listen." In other words, the stick came after you were supposed to have listened, after you were supposed to have learned. Sometimes what we do as parents is we start with a stick. The first time a child does something wrong, we start with a stick. We start with a punishment. That's the first time. The first time is not when you start with a stick or start with a punishment. Because remember, the first thing we are doing, as the Bible says, we are raising them in the training. We are providing the skill. Now imagine if the coach would bench a player every time the player made a mistake during training. Training is where you say, no, don't do it like this, do it like that. Don't do it like this, do it like that. It is when the player has been trained and the player still does not come up to standard that the coach will then say, I'm going to bench you this match. You're not going to play because you have not met the standard. But you don't start by benching. You start by training. You start by providing the education. You start by providing the support, explaining it. So-and-so, come and show him how to do it. This is what I want to do it. And this is why players would say it's different playing for a coach who was once a player. They're able to demonstrate. They're able to get into your mind to figure out what it is that you should do. And as parents, we've all been children at some point. So we don't start with the stick. Now today, the stick is illegal. The stick is corporal punishment. The government calls it assault. But it does not necessarily have to be a crisis. Why? For two reasons. The first reason is this. It comes after a long process of having trained the child. This is when you've kind of sort of felt, I've tried everything. This is just supposed to be pain that reinforces what we have taught you. It is not always necessary to have in the process of training. And we see that with adults. We get trained for different professions without ever being beaten up. We can do the same thing with children. Secondly, there is a second thing that accompanied the stick. There's a phrase that was used that says, "Indonga ayakimzi." Now this phrase generally means that the stick of violence does not build a home. Now this phrase was generally used in the context of a husband and wife, because isiXhosa speakers believed that you can never build your home with your wife using violence. And so they would generally say to a man who has violent tendencies, "No, indonga ayakimzi." Violence will never build a home. The idea was to emphasize dialogue and talking and understanding and forgiveness when things have gone terribly wrong. But this same phrase could be transported to children as well, where you understand that if you're simply going to be beating children all the time, at some point they get used to the beating. And when they get used to the beating, it no longer has an impact. Instead, you have children that have been provoked to wrath, who are angry, who are bitter, who are looking for an opportunity to do whatever they want to do. In their minds, they're going to be beaten anyway. They might as well not obey. And it defeats the purpose. As much as they brought in the stick in their model of raising children. Today, where the stick is illegal, in the back of our minds, we are wondering, isn't this sparing the rod and spoiling the child? The rod has always come at the end. At the beginning came Deuteronomy chapter 6. Teach these things to your children. Let's start there as fathers. Let's be present and let's teach them. Let's model them. Let's get the children around them to be able to provide the peer education. Let's have these rites of passages at different stages of their lives. They don't have to be the same rites of passages they had then. We can come up with your own. Some people have birthday parties. In our home, we've decided to throw huge celebrations every time a child gets baptized, because that to us is an important rite of passage. It's an important decision that they've made. You can come up with your own. And when those rites of passages are there, you will communicate the expectations you have now that the child is at this stage. You'll provide the necessary education, and you'll make the necessary allowances. We don't always have to bring in the stick, but we have to be present. And in all of this, in all of these different stages of trying to raise our children in the training and admonition of the Lord, let us remember this. We are to do so without any bitterness, without anger, without wrath, without clamor, and without evil speaking. How? We should be kind to our children. We should be tender-hearted to our children. We should be forgiving to our children, because God has forgiven us as well. Interesting thing that E.G. White says. She writes and says this about our homes. He says that our homes should be a sample of heaven, a sample. In other words, as our children learn what to do and what not to do, the atmosphere of the home must be sweet. Which means, as a father, it doesn't help if the children are afraid of me. It doesn't help if I scare them, because when I scare them, it will not allow them to learn from me. It will allow them to listen and avoid punishment. I will not have the opportunity of teaching things they should do. Instead, they will be learning from me how not to get punished. I should be there. If they are scared of me, they will most likely not want to follow what I do, because in their minds, I would not be a model. There is nothing as painful as when a child decides, I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to be like my mother. As fathers, we would like to be models to our children, so that they don't just become like us, they become better people than we were. When we get to the kingdom, it would be great if we were to say to the Lord, this is what I tried to do with my children. And I'm glad that the Holy Spirit worked with them. They agreed to be worked with by the Holy Spirit, such that here they are, better people than we were as parents. If I can raise my son to be a better man than I am, if I can raise my daughters to be better people than I am, then I think the Lord would have blessed me. So, Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4 says, Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but raise them in the training and admonition of the Lord. May God richly bless us as we raise our children in the training and admonition of the Lord.
Moses kope matata lindawo ingcwele. Moses kope matata zako ngoba lindawo ingcwele. Moses kope matata zako Moses imbatata. Moses akukhiphi imbatata zako ngoba lindawo ingcwele. Wayesesithi uJehova hamba ungekipite, batshela ama-Israyeli izwe laseKhenani. Batshele baphume bonke eKipite bayokhonza ehlane. Mina ngokuthuma kuyo Faro, ngesandla sinamandla. Bahamba khona uMoses, kuyo itshela inkosi uFaro. Zehla izinhlupho eKipite, uFaro wathi phumani. Namaya nama-Israyeli beqonda eKhenani, baze bayofika olwandle olubomvu okwakungekho izibuko lokuya khona Moses inangu
Nangufaro
siqedane Moses safathina nezingane zethu ngasehlane Moses Moses sizothini namhlanje wasesithi uJehova Moses induku yakho awela maIsraeli awela maGibhithe atapha maIsraeli ashona maGibhithe dumisani nonke uSomandla wasikhipha eGibhithe sesisindile ngasolwandle sesiyongena ezweni leKhenani